Here is the Valve Index, and in this video we're going to be talking about the best and worst aspects of this VR headset. Let's go! Right, as usual we're going to go straight into the best and worst aspects of this headset. We're going to be brutal, we're not going to hold back any punches, and at the end of the video, hopefully a not too long video, at the end of it you will have a good overview of this device. So what's the best thing about this device that stands out? Putting it on for the first time, what is it that will arouse you? Well, the screens are good, the comfort's pretty nice, but the thing that really stands out with this headset is the audio quality and the way the actual headphones work on the device. Basically, they're not really headphones, they're more like speakers that are just resting slightly away from your ear. The end result is you don't have anything pushing on your ears, but you still end up getting really nice, bassy, crisp, high quality audio. The sound on this is absolutely fantastic, absolutely amazing. I would really like it going forwards if every VR headset manufacturer just did this with for their sound. it really is that good. If you were going to buy these sort of headphones yourself separately for another VR headset, you'd more than happily spend upwards of £80 to £100 just for the type of sound quality and comfort with the sound quality that you get from these. I mean, personally, I really like the original Oculus Rift headphones. I found they work fine. They're not as bassy as these headphones, and they only rest on your ear a little bit. But these, if you like those original Oculus Rift headsets, headphones, these sort of take it up to another notch. And it really does add a lot to the immersion and just the experience of the VR from the sound alone. I think sound is actually really important for VR, and it's something that's often overlooked. That is the first and possibly the actual best thing about this headset, which is a little bit worrying because you would hope it'd be something else. But stave off that negativity. Sound, top job, Valve. Amazing. Right, so the first negative, being a negative Nancy, I would say is the fact that the sweet spot on these lenses is actually quite small. Now, let's be specific about what I mean by sweet spot, because there seems to be a bit of confusion about this. So, sweet spot, as I've been using the term, and as people I know have been using the term since the DK1, is once you put the headset on, like when you get the headset on, the amount you have to move it to get it into position, the sort of amount of it that is the position that allows you to get a clear image, or as clear an image as possible from the given lenses on that headset. So the larger the sweet spot, the less that you have to fiddle around with the headset on your face, moving it around to get a good clear image. Now, the sweet spot on this is basically exactly the same as the sweet spot on the original Vive and on the Vive Pro. It might be a tiny bit bigger, but the sweet spot is basically the same as those headsets. Now, what is bigger is that when you've got it in the sweet spot, you can look around and the image is mostly clear, like the same clarity as the center, towards the edges. So once you've got that sweet spot in, you've tightened it on your head, you're pretty much good to go. It's going to be a nice clear image all the way through. So the eye box, once you've got the sweet spot and when you move your eyes around, is actually pretty good on this. A lot better than the original, than the Vive and the Vive Pro, I would say. You also obviously have IPD adjustment that you don't have on some of the other headsets like the Rift S, which allows you to accommodate different IPDs and make sure that you can actually get your eyes into that relatively small sweet spot. But the thing is, I have to say, after having used the Rift S, which doesn't have adjustable IPD, so that's pretty piss poor, but despite that, the sweet spot on the Rift S is absolutely ginormous. Like, you really don't have to get the headset on the Rift S in the perfect place for it to be a nice clear image. And also on the Rift S, the eye box is basically maximum crispness all the way to the edge. So the Rift S has a large sweet spot combined with a large eye box. And it really did hit me, putting this on for the first time, that this is like going back to the Vive, having got used a bit to using the Rift S recently, and it really does feel like a big step backwards. There's times when you're playing FPS games or more active games with this headset, or even just driving simulators where you're sat down, where you have to adjust the headset because you feel like, I'm not getting the absolute maximum crispness from it, so I just give it a little movement. And to be honest, I feel like we should be past that. Having used the Rift S, and the Rift S isn't a perfect device. I'm just using this specifically for the lenses here as an example because it does this. It's one of the best things it does. Having used the Rift S, you kind of just get used to not having to adjust the headset on your head, and the headset might move a little bit, but it's all sharp, it's all good. You have to think about it, but you definitely do have to think about with the actual sweet spot with this. And sure, a way around it is to put it on nice and tight, tighten it up, lock it in, and get it into position. But then you're also forcing yourself to actually have it on really tight. And personally, I'd rather not have the VR headset absolutely clamped to my face. I like to have it a little bit, just enough so that the headset's not moving around much. Not sort of head crabbed to my... Well, it's Valve, isn't it? No wonder it's like head crabs to your face. So that sweet spot to me is a huge negative for this headset. But the eye box is a big improvement over if you use a Vive, the original Vive, the Vive Pro, and the... Well, I'd say the original Rift actually has quite a good eye box, but the sweet spot on the original Rift isn't too good. But also, once you've got this, actually, when you've got the lenses in place on this and you're in that sweet spot, the sort of general distortion from looking around is really good in that you move your head around and everything, and stuff doesn't warp and skew a bit, which it does a little bit on the Rift S, and it does a lot more on the original Oculus Rift. So, yes, the sweet spot is a huge letdown, in my opinion. What's another really good thing with this? Well, go into a positive. The actual clarity of the image from the resolution of the screen. Now, this is, I think it's 1600, but I don't know the exact resolution. It's the same resolution as the Vive Pro. However, it uses an RGB LCD screen, RGB stripe LCD screen, which basically means you end up with a higher pixel density. The end result is basically, in terms of the actual raw image clarity, the resolution of the image that you perceive to your eyes, the image clarity is absolutely phenomenal on this. You can look at the floor or stuff further in the distance. Well, anything that's within like 2 or 3 meters is basically as you would see it in real life. Not quite, but it obviously depends on the game you're playing and the resolution of the text and how that's done. But in terms of general fidelity and clarity, anything within sort of 2-3 meters is effectively pin sharp, which is really, really quite impressive. Also, of course, the screen door is not something you particularly notice with this headset. So I think with the newer headsets, the screen door isn't really... It's not like how with the original Vive, the original Rift, and some of the other headsets on the market, the older ones, where the screen door was like, oh, it's the screen door, I'm looking through a mesh. None of the newer headsets really feel as if you're looking through a screen door. There's just a sort of general character to the end resulting image where you can tell that's what makes up the pixels, but it's not really like a screen door anymore. It's just like a sort of textured look to stuff, especially when you're looking into the distance. But yeah, so no real screen door, absolutely fantastic sort of just fidelity to the image. But that does come with a but. Because unfortunately it does, because of the LCD screen, the contrast is pretty washed out. Now, from using this, I feel like it's more washed out than the Rift S, which has an LCD screen in it as well. It's not awful. Like if you're playing a game where it's bright, where you've got a bright environment in the game, then it's not really a huge problem. But if you're playing something where it's got, you're playing like a horror game, or you're just playing a game like even playing Pavlov on darker levels where there's dark room, you're like in the bright and there's a dark room, that you do just see this sort of greyness to it rather than it being actually dark. And I know this is, again, it's going to be partially subjective. Some people probably won't bother them. But for me, that definitely affects the sense of it feeling immersive. It reminds me that I'm looking at a screen. It makes it feel more like I'm looking at a screen than I'm using a VR headset, although I'm actually in the game world. As I say, if it's a totally bright room, like in the virtual environment, and there's not that much contrast there, you don't notice it. It's not a problem because the game is not asking the screen to display something that's particularly dark. But if you were in a sort of contrasting scene, that's where it really stands out, and I think it really does damage immersion quite a bit. That's just the nature of LCD, using LCD screens for VR. So that's a negative. Let's pop on to the positives. One advantage of the LCD screen, though, especially with the Valve Index, is, of course, that it can go up to 144 FPS. Now, through our testing, it did seem that you really do notice a difference between 80 and 120. So when you're playing games at 80, especially if you're playing like a driving simulator, and when you go around the corners at 80 hertz, you can sort of perceive it's kind of like a judder. It's just not completely smooth. When you turn the steering wheel, you can see the increments of the steering turn. Very similar to if you use a mouse on a 60 hertz TV, and you see the trail of the mouse. If you then get a gaming monitor that's running like 144 hertz or 120 hertz, whatever, you notice that the mouse, the trail of the mouse is much smoother, and sometimes there's even hardly any trail at all. The increments are there's more increments there because there's more frames to display the in between movement of the mouse cursor. You basically get that same sort of gaming monitor aspect out of this headset. Now, I do think for a lot of VR games, that's not really going to matter so much. It's not going to be like the biggest thing ever. I mean, I have an Oculus Quest and I use the Oculus Rift S. For many games, you could totally be fine with the 80 hertz on those devices. And it's not, it's fine. You can play most VR games and you're not going to massively notice it. It's great. It's fine. 80 hertz is fine. It's sort of like the minimum. Now you can run this headset at lower frame rates, so you could turn the graphics up in your game if you're perfectly happy with those frame rates. So it's got that as an option, which is really nice to actually have that in the software on this, where you can choose. I think you can choose 80, 90, 120, and 144 hertz. So that's nice as an option. But anyway, so the point where the games where this I would say 120 hertz is particularly noticeable is if you're playing like 11 table tennis or table tennis games or anything where something's moving towards you very quickly. You notice on the Oculus Quest, they don't have 11 table tennis, but they got I can't remember what it's called. It's another table tennis game. You notice when the ping pong ball's coming towards you, it's incremented, and it actually makes it harder to if you're playing faster, it makes it harder to be precise. It makes it harder to judge that ball coming towards you. If you're playing Beat Saber, you notice on the Quest when you're moving your arms up and down and moving around, you notice that, especially when you're playing faster songs or you're playing a medium setting with the learning mode and you speed it up, you notice that it's kind of just not 100% in sync with your movements, or that it's in sync with your movements, but visually it's just, it's all kind of feels a little bit slow. So I do think the additional frame rate is actually it's a subtle but actually quite important thing for VR. It does make a big difference. I wouldn't say 144 hertz makes that much of a difference. It seems to be that 120 hertz is kind of the sweet spot for my messing around with this. And at 120 hertz, you get that sort of, just from the basic head tracking, just from the movement of steering wheels, just from like the sports games and stuff and how stuff moves with them at 120 hertz, it looks and behaves pretty much as you'd expect things to behave in reality and looks very crisp. Whereas at 80 hertz, it just feels a little bit slower. Again, it's really quite analogous to if you go from a 120 hertz plus on a gaming monitor and then play a game 60 hertz on a TV or something like that. It makes quite a difference. I think gamers or people that are playing more competitive games will really appreciate that frame rate increase. So that was a positive. Loving them frame rates. Negativo. This is a pretty big negative, actually. Maybe I should have put this negative sooner. One thing that really stood out to me when we first got this headset as a big negative was the ghosting that you get from the lenses. So the ghosting on this is slightly different to other VR headsets I've used, in that it's more as if the type of ghosting character you get on the Valve Index is more similar to if you had shades on, clear shades, and you were to put a bit of a smudge on them and then shine a light on them. You get this sort of diffuse glow across the whole of your shades, and it really is quite obtrusive. It does depend on the scene. I mean, again, if you're playing a bright level where everything's bright, you're not going to get much of that ghosting, and it's not going to be a problem. But if you're playing, say, a specific specific cockpit game, you're playing a driving game, and it's particularly bright outside, and you're in a cockpit with a very small window, you're going to get a lot of ghosting. If there's just like a bit of white text in the middle and the rest of it's dark, you get so much ghosting that it basically blows out the darkness around the image, again making the contrast look even worse than it actually is. It's really quite bad, to be honest. I would say it's hard to judge if the sweet spot thing's annoying. The sort of, it's not really God rays. I guess you could call it sort of bloom God ray, whatever you want to call it. It really is annoying. It really does ruin that sense of immersion again of the headset. It reminds you that you're wearing a VR headset when you're getting into something. It reminds you of it. So games, say certain cockpits, Beat Saber, just text where there's black on the screen. It's like, in many ways, it's like going back to the Oculus Rift CV1 in terms of the ghosting. It might even be worse than the original Vive, to be honest. Like, it has a different character to that bloomy light lens effect with this. The Vive, you would see the concentric rings of the Fresnel lens more. The Fresnel lens, I think, is the rings are a lot smaller. They're a lot less noticeable, but the bloom is just there, and it really is a bit of a downer for me with this headset. So let's. That was a negative muscle. Positive. Let's go back to a positive. The actual comfort of the headset. Now, this is kind of like a mixed positive. You do with this headset, the actual facial interface and the back part of the headset and the way you tighten it using this knob on the back. And the actual wearable comfort of it compared to original HTC Vive, it's on an absolute another level of comfort. Also, what's really nice is that once you've got it dialed in for your own use, and it doesn't take much time to get it dialed in, you can slip it on your head and take it off really quickly, or just leave it on your forehead quite comfortably and pull it back down. One of the downsides with the Rift S, for example, is that once you've set up with the Rift S the back part of the headset and got it into place, if you take it off your head, you find it can be awkward to get back on. But this, you can set it up and basically just leave it, and it will stay exactly how you had it before, dialed in how you like it, and you're basically good to go. It can get a little bit warm and sweaty in the device. Hang on, this is a bit of negativity here, guys. We're merging the negative with the positive. So in contrast to that basic comfort, and also actually for me, I've got a big fat nose, so this might be just with me, I find it actually blocks out the light really well if you're looking for a headset that blocks out the light. Though I've heard other people think differently to that. But there's nothing that's tickling my nose, my big fat nose with this headset. I I would say this is a really comfortable headset for the most part. But what I would say is, for whatever reason, where the cable comes in, or the front part of the headset actually gets quite warm from, I guess it's from the power going into it. It's got a powered USB socket on there for the front. But it does get quite warm, and when you've got it on your face, it does actually feel quite warm. Granted, it's quite hot at the moment in the UK in general, and we don't have air conditioning. I don't think it's the warmth that you get from this headset isn't such that you're like, oh my god, I'm dying. But you do notice it. Again, compared to the Rift S, for example, you definitely notice the additional warmth from this headset. And part of that is also because you're sort of clamping the headset to your face more to then guarantee that you're getting that sweet spot. So it's comfortable. It stays in position. You can take it on and off your head, and obviously the headphone aspect of the comfort of them not touching your ears is really nice. But it does feel a little bit clammy. I've not noticed the lenses fog up particularly at all though, or anything like that. So that's really nice. But yeah, I would say it is a very comfortable headset. But personally, I keep using the Rift S as a comparison because I've just been using it recently, and it's I think it's a good general comparison. Probably not good if you've not got a Rift S, but with the Rift S, one thing you do notice is that you don't have to have it on so tight, again because of that sweet spot thing, and it is a lighter headset. Obviously the Rift S has absolutely crap sound on it, but the point is, with the Rift S it feels a lot lighter in general. And though this is a better strap design and more comfortable face interface, the fact that you have to have this on tighter and the fact that it is warmer does, in some sense, negate, in my opinion, other aspects of the comfort and better build quality this has compared to the Rift S, for example. So hopefully that explains the comfort. Comparing it to the original Vive, this is on another level, and also my experience. Well, the original Vive, this is like literally on another level of comfort. Compared to the Vive Pro with the head strap they have, I would say this is moderately more comfortable than that, especially if you're using the Vive Pro with the default foams and everything. So yeah, I think they've done a good job with the comfort with this sort of the type of design that this is. Negative, we've got to be more negative. What's another negative that we have not talked about yet? Okay, I'm going to go there, guys. Right, the field of view on this headset. The field of view on this headset. So, this is where the marketing, I think, is a little bit disingenuous. If you've got a Vive, or a Vive Pro, and you use like a 6mm VR cover or equivalent, so anyone that's basically like a VR enthusiast is going to be probably using a Vive Pro or a Vive with like a VR cover or something that makes the foam thinner. You are essentially getting the same field of view that you get from this headset. This headset might give you like 5 to 10 degrees more horizontal field of view. In fairness, this headset I think it gives you more vertical field of view. I've not fully tested this. There's some spreadsheets out there. People have actually tested it, and you can look at the exact numbers if you want. But the point I'm making is, even if you dial the screen so they're basically touching your eyes or as close as possible, the field of view difference between this and the Vive and the Vive Pro isn't insane. It's not like when you put this on, you're like, oh, that's a better field of view. You're like, oh, it seems a little bit better. You know, based off the general marketing, the canted lenses and everything, it kind of gives you the impression that the field of view would be more striking than it is. Now, I wasn't expecting Pimax from this. I wasn't expecting something insane, but I was expecting it to be just a little bit better, or more noticeably better than the Vive Pro, and other headsets. You do notice, of course, the field of view on this and the Vive Pro is actually quite a bit better than the Rift S and the original Oculus Rift, of course. But I mean, the Vive's got a better field of view than the original Rift as well. So, but within the context of the Vive and the Vive Pro, really, the field of view is not that much better with this. Vertical field of view is I'd say the vertical field of view is noticeably different. But my limitation with VR is horizontal field of view. You do get a sense of immersion from vertical field of view, especially for stood-up room scale games, and that adds to immersion. But for flight sims, driving simulators, and actual good games, games with more depth than your average VR title. Look, I love Pavlov, I love VR room scale games, but unless Valve actually bloody releases something this year, and Boneworks is good, and some other titles come out later this year, you know, most of the actual room scale games are pretty pants. They're really interesting as VR titles, but they don't have longevity and depth to them still. So hopefully that will change. So anyway, point is, horizontal field of view with this, I think could have been a lot better. And a really big downside is that if you do bring the lenses all the way as close as possible to your eyes, then you notice the edges of the screen are like, so say I've got my hands here for field of view, there would be two oval black black shapes, like you can see the edges of the screen. Now when you look left, that disappears, and when you look right, that disappears. But when you're looking straight ahead, which is what you're doing most of the time, you have these like two big black things at the edges, which can only be removed by zooming the screen out a bit to then using the sort of the screen then cuts it off the however the innards of the headset are, cut those edge bits off so you don't get those curves coming into your view. I would say those curves edges are more obnoxious than the square edges that you get on the Rift S or the original Oculus Rift when you put that as close to your eyes as possible. If you wear glasses, you could probably put these on easier and you could probably adjust it better to get a wider field of view. And, you know, you're not having to get a VR cover. It's out of the box. You can adjust this and get the maximum possible field of view that you want to get out of it, that the headset can provide. So it is a big improvement out of the box over the Vive Pro, for example. I'm not saying, it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just that if you're expecting it to be significantly better than those other headsets, I think you'll feel a little bit let down. And that curvy edge thing is really, I find that just takes you out of immersion. It's more noticeable in that the curvy edge thing is much more noticeable in flight and driving simulators. If you're playing something like Pavlov onwards, like a first-person shooter, a room scale stood up, the curvy edge things are a lot less noticeable. So again, it might depend on the type of game you're playing. Also, for whatever reason, if the screen's brighter in general, like the scene you're playing in is brighter, those curvy edge things are less noticeable as well. Than if you're in a certain contrasting scenes, then the edges are more noticeable. It just, there's going to be a subjective element to it, but at the end of the day, there's bloody black curvy edge things if you have the headset as close to your eyes as possible. So yes, there's that. Right. Other positives with the headset. I can't think of any like huge big positives. I mean, a lot of people are going on about the build quality. Oh, the build quality. I mean, yeah, it feels all right. I mean, okay. The build quality is actually fantastic for the price of just the headset. I mean, the headset is £459. And for that price, this headset is absolutely bloody amazing for that price. Fortunately, you will need to buy some lighthouse units, which cost £140 each. And then you'll probably need some controllers, which cost, £260. I bought the pack that comes with everything because I wanted to test it all properly. But the headset on its own, the actual price of the headset, it's absolutely fantastic quality for the price of the headset. And just in general, as a sort of overview perspective of the headset, outside the price of it, it is put together and built really nicely. But then at the same time, you have this shiny plastic on front of it. I went a bit northern there. On front of it, which you can remove to access the frunk and stuff. But this looks really tacky. The plastic cover thing that goes over it, and the way that's reflected and picks up your fingerprints and everything, that's a little bit tacky, I think. Also, the bottom part of it here, because there's no like protection on it or anything, it's not like got any soft rubber on it. When you put this down, if you put it on a hard floor, then it's probably going to scratch up quite easily over time. I'm not expecting a headset manufacturer to like really think of these things, but I'm just saying in the context of like a lot of people going on about the build quality. It's like, well, yeah, no, it's the build quality of a good consumer device. It's like we've got so used to like being sort of experimental guinea pigs that put up with wonky half prototypey stuff from VR, which I'm a VR enthusiast. I love trying stuff. I like buying stuff from companies, and I'm prepared to pay for VR. I'm here for the journey. I don't mind being exploited, is what I'm saying. But if you're just thinking as a sort of actual consumer product, this is what it's just what you'd kind of expect from it. So yeah, the build quality is good, but it's kind of just what you would expect, is what I'm saying. The actual the facial interchange coming off with magnets is a really nice feature of the actual build quality of the headset. The magnets could probably be a touch stronger, but I've not noticed it falling off whilst you're using it. And that'll be really nice for additional facial interfaces and being able to swap them over. Also, the facial interface, how it separates it away from the centre of it. If you start sweating and stuff, I think it will actually do a good job of actually keeping the sweat away from the internals of the device. I've not fully tested that. I've not done any crazy workout sessions with this as of yet, but I get the impression that'll be the case. So, anyway, that's pretty much it for the sort of main pros and cons of the headset unit. Let's move to the next part, the controllers. And before I start talking about the actual specifics of the controllers, I will say, of course, the tracking for the headset and for the controllers using the lighthouses is absolutely superb. I'm definitely of the school of thought and opinion that the lighthouse as a tracking method is by far the best for just raw fidelity of tracking. Not the most convenient to initially set up. You do have to drill them into your walls, and then if you then decide to take your computer or your headset into another room, you're going to have to move your tracking houses and everything. So nowhere near as convenient or as offering the utility that you get from like the Quest, obviously, or the Rift S. But the actual if you're a sort of hardcore gamer type, or that precision. Again, if you're playing something like 11 table tennis or just anything where you really are trying to be, you want that precision, you want as much precision as possible, then the inside out tracking is the best. It just works absolutely superb. And the lighthouses cover the room nicely. Incidentally, if you're playing driving simulators or flight simulators, you can just use one lighthouse and you'll be perfectly fine. I mean, what you could do, if you're more of a sim person, you could just buy one lighthouse and the headset, ignore the controllers, and that will set you back 620 pounds, I think. So for £620, you could get a bloody good high-resolution screen with the tracking and everything, and that's actually a really good value for money solution to get a very high-resolution VR with driving and flight simulators. So worth keeping that in mind. You can buy all these bits and bobs separately. Anyway, onto the controllers. My God, this video's going on way too long. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to be as quick as possible whilst also being as detailed as possible. So, the hand controllers, the knuckles, or what I guess you call them the index controllers now. Right, let me be positive first. Right, the way it rests on your hand and the sort of ergonomics for the hand fit with that and how this sort of way you hold it and everything, that is absolutely genius, absolutely superb. I would like all VR hand controllers to now rip off that design of how you hold it, the way you can adjust this strap to move it to accommodate different size hands. You can push this down here to move it in and out to get it nice and comfortable. So you don't need a separate hand strap. Also, I found you can just pick them up off the side. Even if you've got the VR headset on, it's very easy to just pick them up and just slide them onto your hands. They're super nice to use at a basic ergonomic level if you're using the triggers and the general movement of what you do in VR. The tracking, the sort of shields that have the tracking light sensors on them, don't get in the way when you're reloading and doing various actions in games. That is absolutely amazing, really good. Everyone just needs to rip off this. This is what the next Oculus or Facebook, they need to rip off that. HTC, rip that off. That's it. That is absolutely super. That is actually amazing. Really, really, really happy about that. But Valve, why do you do this? So the button's on top. I don't know how clear that is on the camera. The button's on top. So it's got the touchpad thing here, which is similar to the Vive touchpad. And that's in the middle. So that's like the general place where your thumb wants to go. That's the most ergonomic, natural resting thing, is for you to use this middle thing, the touchpad. No, the problem is that the touchpad is crap. Like, you can use it to like move, scroll stuff around and what have you, but they've indented it and shaped it so it's tiny. So that the Vive touchpad, the big circular one, which is like the Steam Remote touchpad, though it's crap, as touchpads go on that device, the fact that it's a larger surface area makes it easier to sort of move your finger around and manipulate it. It's also the focal point of that controller, because it doesn't have a joystick and buttons on it in particular. It's mostly just that touchpad. And so I don't really like it on the Vive controllers, because touchpads are stupid as gaming input devices. Opinion, but you all know it's true. But at least it's in the middle. So on this though, they've added the joystick, because you know what, games actually work well with a joystick for movement and controlling and adjusting things and playing legacy games. And they've also added buttons on it, which are great for most. You know, a button is actually pretty damn good as a way to sort of actuate something. There's inbuilt haptics. In the sense that a button, you know, when you push a button, you know when you've pushed it, you know when you haven't pushed it, you can feel it on your finger before you do push it. Buttons work pretty damn well. So at least they've got the joystick and the buttons there. But because they've decided to keep this stupid touchpad nonsense, the joystick is too far to the side and the buttons are too far to the side for it to be sort of the go-to ergonomic thing that you want to use. It always feels, when you're using the joystick on this, it always feels like you're reaching to use the joystick on the controllers. It's like, oh, I'm having to use the joystick, it's a bit out of the way, it's not ideal. Why? It's like the main thing that people are going to be using to move stuff, to move in a game, or like, you know, as locomotion or to select stuff, because a joystick works bloody good to select things, much better than a touchpad. The buttons are the same, it's like they're kind of out of the way. Now, you will, over time, get used to the actual placement of the analog stick, and you will get used to placement of the buttons. So it's not the kind of thing that you can't get used to. It's not the end of the world. It's not that it's a massive strain to access it. It might be for people with smaller hands, but I can totally. It's well within the realms of most people, I think, being able to get used to the joystick. So, you know, it's. You'll be able to get over that. But what I've already found as a problem is that, well, first of all, the touchpad is just, because of the shape of it, I mean, if you're just using the edges of the touchpad, you accidentally end up touching the joystick. If you're playing Pavlov and you're just playing the game normally, you find that you end up accidentally touching the touchpad. So you end up with this situation when both the touchpad and the joystick are in the way of each other. It's like, Valve, you either have to have one or the other. I'm sorry. Get rid of your touchpad stuff. I understand there's aspects to the touchpad which it does open up more options in many ways. I can appreciate, and it's got the haptic thing in it that does the vibrations that are more nuanced than your little piezoelectric motor. I appreciate that, but it's crap. So come on back. I'm just telling you. I'm just being honest here. Some of the developers should have just told you this. Maybe they did, and someone's just really stubborn at Valve. And I know I'm an arse for just being how I am with this, but it's crap. Come on. Bin it. Bin the touchpad. Put a proper, nice, chunky vibration motor in there that uses more battery. I don't know. Whatever. Just do the touchpad's a terrible idea with this. Put the D-pad and the A and B buttons in the right place. Maybe even just add another button on there whilst you're getting rid of the touchpad. You know what would happen then is that these controllers would then be way more in line with the Rift controllers, which aren't 100% perfect, but they work fine for, like, you can kind of see your fingers in VR with the Rift controllers. You can use all the games with it. There's lots of games developed for that. They at the lowest sort of common denominator level, the Oculus Rift and the Rift S controllers basically work. And so if you did something similar, developers would find it a lot easier. But instead, Valve have gone absolutely bonkers. And so we've got this. That's that rant over. Was this video meant to be concise? Of course, you do have the finger tracking with these, in the sense that, so when you move your hands like this, they move in game. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to always work perfectly. And especially you'll notice with the thumb, when you're using the thumb finger on the top of the controllers, it kind of does this instant movement in game, because I don't think it's got the full depth of thumb tracking, as far as I can tell, in the same extent that it does with the finger tracking. I mean, the finger tracking is really nice. It is quite cool to have that in the game, but in what game are you really going to use that all the time? And the majority of games that already exist, it's like just having a pointy finger is good, and at most things you're just pointing something in a game. What are you going to be doing with your little individual fingers that really, really matters in VR? Maybe there'll be some games that come out that do use it, but just, you can pretty, like the grip button can represent your hands being gripped, and the trigger button and your thumb. And that conveys most of sort of the communication aspects and most of the hand emotion that you need in VR. Why we've got all this stuff in here that I think it's kind of like a bit, it's like, well, yeah, it's interesting. I can appreciate it from a sort of technological standpoint, and, you know, but really, so the kicker is the controllers on their own are £260. What are you thinking? £260? It's the price of like a Nintendo Switch with a game. It's like a games console in your hands. I mean, okay, if they cost a lot, but they're absolutely amazing, fine. I mean, and also, you know, it's enthusiast stuff. You're prepared to pay more. But I'm really struggling to understand how these the £260 that these controllers cost better the Rift controllers. Even if you were going to say the Rift controllers are being sold at cost because Facebook make the money off the store, or whatever. I'm sure Valve make their money off the store, even if these are sold at cost. But whatever you say that, it's like, even if the Rift controllers, even if the Valve equivalent of the Rift controllers would cost £100, that's just like, I would take that over paying twice as much for these controllers. Unless the price of these massively come down, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. Lastly, the joystick. This is probably like a really big thing I should have said sooner. If you push down, you can't push down on the joystick to get it to click. On the left controller, for some reason it kind of works sometimes and not others. When you're pushing forwards, if you push forwards on it, or you've got the controller at an angle, the downward click action is blocked, or it can sometimes actuate, but you don't actually get the click. And also, the downward click on the joystick requires way too much force. So it's actually, if you're using that as a jog in a game, which is quite common, it's not comfortable to do that. You're going to get finger fatigue. You're going to have like superhuman thumbs. So that's a absolutely huge failure. I just get the impression the overall ergonomic shape is like, great, good job, that's VR, thought out well. And then it's like, did you actually get these tested by actual gamers when it comes to the buttons and how they operate? Also, the D-pad movement, it doesn't feel awful, but it doesn't feel like a high quality D-pad on like an Xbox One controller. It feels more like a sort of what you'd expect from an off-brand Xbox controller. It's almost got like a little bit of a graty sound to it. It's just not good enough for the price that these cost, or even if you ignore the price equation, because there can be factors into why something is expensive. I don't think it's good enough. If it's if it's an enthusiast device and these controllers are sort of a enthusiast thing, no, no, Valve, not acceptable. I'm telling you. I'm just being honest. Why other people? I guess pre-access stuff. You know, if you want to get stuff sent early, sign NDAs and things. You can't be brutal. If you want to get sent stuff to review as a YouTuber, it's not prudent to talk how I talk. Let's be real about it. There are actually a few YouTubers that are brutally honest. I need to promote them more, because there's some YouTube channels out there, and some not just YouTube press channels, that just don't. They're just not saying stuff. It's like lying through omission. But there you go. The Knuckles controllers, way too much hype. Really nice to hold on to. Absolutely shit button placement on top. So, where does that leave us? Where does that leave us with the index in terms of my good bad first impression review? All in all, the headset itself is really, really fantastic. Especially if you just buy the headset for headset price and the lighthouses, you're getting a really good headset for the value for money on it. It's not perfect. It's not like we're not at the point yet where we have one VR headset that, within the current sort of paradigm of VR, the current technology that's available, we're not there where one headset ticks all the boxes of available technology. You try one headset and it's got one thing better than another headset. You try another headset and and you're like, oh, it's more comfortable than that one, but the image isn't as good. And then we're not there yet. I think we're sort of 2 years off. Some company just going, okay, look, this headset did that right. We'll copy the good parts. That's what we need. But that aside, who would buy this and who would really like it? If you're still soldiering on with an original Vive and you've got your lighthouses, bloody get this this right away. Even if you don't get the controllers, which the controllers work, they're going to get better, but just for the price, they're not worth it, I don't think. But the headset is an absolute bargain for the price of the headset. Absolutely amazing if you've already got the lighthouse units. If you specifically just want the clarity, because the clarity, and you're also playing, as I say, more sporty games, then this is a really good headset to go for, especially if you don't mind about the lack of contrast so much. And the frame rate aspect, especially the 120 Hz. I mean, 144 is nice, but I really notice a difference with 120 Hz. So that makes a big difference as well. So that would be something worth getting. And then, of course, the sound, as I say. So the headsets, I think Valve have done a really fantastic job in terms of the compromises they have made with the headset. Not perfect, but for the price, the headset's spot on. Really good. Really happy with the headset. But not the controllers. If I was to choose between a Rift S and this headset, I'd say I've yet to try the latest update to the Rift S to see how the hand tracking works when in front of your face. Reports are quite positive for that. I would say if you were going to get into VR afresh right now, I would probably say I'd probably go for the Rift S, to be honest. It's not as there's aspects with it that are worse than this headset, and I don't think it's as comfortable for very long play sessions as a headset. Not in terms of the actual strap and the ergonomics of the design, but in terms of there's some quality to the lenses on the Rift headsets. Maybe it's the stereo overlap, maybe it's the focal range. There's some aspect to that personally I find a little bit uncomfortable if I'm doing sort of 2+ hour sessions. If you're doing shorter sessions, then I think the Rift S is probably the best introduction to VR, the best value for money, and the most convenient for VR. But yeah, this is it. It's a shame it's not perfect in all areas, or not even perfect. It's a shame it doesn't do as good as other headsets in all areas, and then this would just be like a total no-brainer. Go and get it. But what I'll be doing is I'll be doing more coverage of this headset. We're trying out with more titles on the channel. So feel free to ask questions then. I mean, subscribe to the channel, and then when we do live streams, you can just ask and I'll just answer you. I talk too much in videos. It's even worse on live streams. But you can also drop comments in this video, and I'll try and answer them as best possible. I probably missed stuff out. This video is way too long, but I'm trying to get everything in there as quick as possible. But that's it, really, guys. I hope that helped you make an informed decision. Thank you very much for watching. Happy tea drinking, and that's it. Off we go. I'm going to play some more VR games. More VR. Off we go. Bye, guys.